So I'm going to start again. So my name is Joanne Butcher. I'm a business coach and I help filmmakers learn how to raise money. And I have Cameron Patterson today as my guest. And we're going to find out how Cameron started his career as a filmmaker and how he got to be doing what he is doing now. So the fun part of this for me always is my first question that I ask Cameron, which is, when did you first know that you were a filmmaker?
Oh, man. I first knew a long time ago. It just took me a long time to get into it.
When was the first thought or the first idea? For me, it was when I was a very, very young child and my dreams said the end.
Yeah.
At the end of the dream, it said the end.
What does that mean? What does that mean? I think for me, I remember seeing a movie that really affected me. Like really, really hit me where I hadn't noticed, I'd always liked movies. I was pretty young. But when I went and saw this particular film, I remember being blown away with how it looked. And then later I was absolutely terrified and screaming like a little girl. It was Alien. And
oh my God.
Yeah. And that whole period, right? I remember I went to the Garrick Theater here in Winnipeg, and it sounded like every year you're going to see a big movie. First it was Jaws, and that was one of the first movies I ever was allowed to see. I think my parents really regretted taking me to that.
How old were you when you saw Jaws then?
I was already like 14, 15.
Okay.
Yeah, because I was playing hockey. It's a really funny story actually. And then after that, the next year after that was Star Wars, right?
Oh yeah.
And then the year after that was Alien, and it was my hockey. It was a lot of the guys on my hockey team, and hockey's a big thing. I'm in Winnipeg,
right.
and I was absolutely committed to the idea of playing hockey and meeting girls and doing that. And then I played drums on the side, so I was pretty covered.
Yeah.
But
all the girl getting activities, right?
Yeah, pretty much. 16, 17, but we got in. I remember getting into the theater and we took up, I don't know, about half a row, and then in front of us at the very first row were all these girls sat down, and we were like, as young guys, and we were like, well, this is gonna be great. And we had no idea what this movie was about. I mean, what the poster was an egg. We thought, well, that looks cool. Let's go see that. And we got in there and it started, and of course I was really struck. It was and I don't remember really noticing that before that, like cinematography, like I don't have a conscious thought of it before that, but it hit me. I'd never seen something like this. And then of course the movie's going on, and we all know now about the big chest bursting thing that comes out. And it's true, I'd never been in a theater where I saw people throw up, and one lady threw up, the rest of us were screaming, and all those girls screamed, popcorn in the air, and ran out.
Oh my God.
And yeah, and I always thought that if I ever did meet Ridley Scott, I mean, here's a pipe dream, that he'd owe me the cost of a ticket, because it took me a whole year to meet a girl that I actually went out with after that experience. But it was just, it was so, and once it got over that, but I was just struck by it. And years later watching it, with my boys, my youngest son is in the industry. He's art department and camera. And, you watch with them, and the horror of it's not as intensified because it's years later, right? But the truth really is they still went, wow, look how this looks. Like it still stands up. So that was, but I mean, it was years later. I didn't get into this until I was in my 40s. So
that was clearly on many, many different levels, some of which were traumatic. That was a really foundational experience.
It really was. I started writing actually after that, and thinking, I didn't have this idea of filmmaker. I didn't have this idea of that. I didn't even know what that job entailed, to be honest.
Right.
But it really got me. I was reading a lot anyway, but that's when I really started wanting to write, and I started to play with the idea of I was starting to this is how long ago now, because I'm 60, but it was filling scribblers. And then I remember when I got a first real typewriter, and that's where it sort of started for me. And it entered into
storytelling.
Storytelling.
Do you remember what kind of stories
always thrillers. I was a thriller guy. That's the books I was reading. I was, into the Bourne Identities long before they became a movie. And I'm
a thriller fan, but it took me until relatively recently to admit it.
Yeah.
And a friend of mine who's a distributor friend of mine in the industry have really helped me with it, because I said, well, women are not supposed to like thrillers, crime and all of that. And he said, have you ever listened to the podcast, My Favorite Murder? And I was like, no. Yeah. And so in My Favorite Murder, these two women who are both comedians, literally read stories of murders. And they when they do the live events, they're in huge theaters with, a couple of thousand, almost all girls, not even women. Screaming. It's an absolutely unbelievable experience. You have to try it. But that was the moment when I went, oh, wait, I'm not the only one, and I'm not weird.
Yeah.
And their whole thing is that they think that women are actually more into crime because we have a greater fear of violence and we want to control it. And I to me, I was like, you know what, that explains a lot to me.
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense, really.
But you knew early on you were into thrillers.
Yeah, I was always the thriller, James Bond, spy stories, thrillers. I actually grew up across the street from a murder.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That probably had an impact as well then.
It actually did, because I got to read the court transcripts. Yeah, I don't want to diverge all over in one section here, but I did. It happened before I was born. I think even in Canadian law history, it's one of the 2 or 3 between the time of crime and the time of conviction. It was Katie Harper case. And if you Google it, you'll find it. Actually, there's a Crimes of Manitoba book out there, and my parents are in it. Yeah. And she and her lover pushed her husband out the window. My dad drove her to the Grace Hospital here in Winnipeg in the mornings on the way to work. They kind of co-rode. And she came across the driveway one morning, and in 1960 or something, and my parents had to go back to his place the night before because he fixed our eaves troughs. And my grandmother, who's passed now, she lived with them at the time, and she said, "Got to go." Wow. Yes. So they went across the house. They were visited, and then they came back. The next morning, she walks across to my dad as if she's supposed to go, but she's in her nightgown, and she says she can't go. Her husband was killed last night. And the word "killed" kept my dad in court forever. And so what happened was, it was ruled as a suicide. This is true crime gold, everyone. Oh my God. And it was ruled as a suicide, but his family, who lived in Newfoundland or something, never bought it. And then years later, her and her lover had gotten married, and they were getting divorced, and they were threatening to out the other one. So the whole case came alive, and I was 15, 16 years old. And my parents are, what? They're telling me what had happened. I was like, I had friends that lived in that house now. I've been in that bedroom. What are you kidding? And my mom, who was so funny, she was very German, very Mennonite. And they just never wanted to talk about it. And I remember the Mounties showing up, and they had the court transcripts because they were dragged through the court case again. And she did. She actually passed away. There was a jail here close to Winnipeg. I think it's moved now, but at the time it was in Portage. And she passed away in prison. She was convicted then at that time. So
true crime gold.
True crime. And I have it in my computer. It's one of the things on my list of things I want to write.
Absolutely.
And I get asked once in a while, "You got something?" And the street was Park Hill Street. Everyone who's listening in Winnipeg, that's where I grew up. And it's called Park Hill. And I always thought it's either going to be a book in drama or, because I did a lot of true crime, and I thought, oh, I never saw that case come up once. I couldn't figure out why. Anyway, but that definitely, I remember reading the transcripts and thinking, whoa, not that I wanted to do some court thing, but it's interesting how it kind of awoken me to dialogue, I think, in some ways.
Uh-huh.
It's the thing I like doing the most in a script. You know, when I'm writing, it's plotting, it's all that stuff, but I like reading dialogue. And
yes. Oh, nice, nice.
there you go.
Well, that to me, that's so fundamental and foundational, both those stories, you know, the vomit in the cinema and the the crime across the street.
Yeah.
Amazing.
But again, it was just fueling future storytelling.
Yeah. But did you keep writing, or?
I did keep writing. I was, you know, doing some short stories. I never went outside the house with it, though. I was really preoccupied in my 20s, in my early 20s. I was definitely wanting to drum. I was full on. I made my living at it.
Wow.
I had kids very early on, and I was still doing it. Winnipeg had a very unique music scene, to be honest, where a musician could make a very good living.
Oh.
You know, you're playing 6 days a week and begging for a week off. And that really didn't happen in a lot of other cities. And it sort of allowed me to be home during the day with young kids as well.
Yes. Yes.
And as time went on, you know, then it changed here, and suddenly I had to travel, and suddenly I realized it wasn't my first choice. Yeah, I was a father first, but it, you know, and I was writing, I was dabbling, and then I, by some fluke, I had stumbled on the idea for a novel, and I had a personal experience. I don't know how much I want to talk about this, but it triggered the idea for the book that I put out, and then I wrote part of it, and then I put it away, because I was simply I was raising kids at that point by myself. But I started to get interested in writing, and I took that idea for the book and I drafted a script, and I naively thought, here's me. I was working in IT. I was a 9-to-5 guy. And I thought, I'll just send it to some agents. Apparently there's agents.
Right.
Oh, this is so cool.
Yeah.
In my mid 30s. And of course I got a ton of rejections. Everybody said, yeah. Have you been produced? No. What are you doing and sending to us? Well, but one agent said yes.
No.
And she's still my agent today. And yeah, she did. And she called me. And what ended up happening is that that's why when you said filmmakers, like it's more like creative life storyteller who's gone separate mediums, right? But what she ended up doing for me, because I was still working, it was booming in Vancouver. She's in Vancouver. It's booming in Vancouver. And there was opportunity to fix scripts. There was opportunity to do things like that. And that led to a couple actual commissions where I was writing scripts for horror producers. And I don't know if any of them got made. Sometimes these titles get changed. The other side of the coin was I was doing these fixes. I was doing these, it's all uncredited, right? But I didn't care. For me, it was.
I mean, to go from sending out a bunch of letters to agents and then getting work, sounds like magic. It sounds like magic.
It was awesome. And here's the other thing, as I could do it from home. I loved it. It was so interesting to see the different styles of writing that happened. And then I would get notes, because I would just get producer notes, and they came to me because I was probably way more affordable, just to do, you know, changing 2 pages on a script or changing dialogue or whatever the notes. So you got to learn how to interpret notes, even though I had no clue at the time what production really entailed. And it literally was a passive income. I bought a ski boat with it. And it was kind of the way in. But when I did decide to try and get into this in my 40s, I was a working musician. I still had kept, you know, semi-pro profile, and I was working. A lot of musicians suddenly wanted video. And I somehow got into this thinking, well, I could do music videos. I could figure that out. So I took a course when they have a film group here in Winnipeg. I think it's very lucky I live here, to be on several
It
levels.
sounds as though that there's a whole
Self-supporting.
scene and a community
There
there.
really is. Yeah, there really is. And the film group was really great. And so you walk in and they put you through the workshop and you really figure it out. And that's where I really got suddenly that experience in Alien came back. So I went, whoa. And I started seeing lighting in a workshop and I'm like, I love this. And here's the other thing that is that I get it. I get it. I've performed behind enough singers. I've done enough live performance. I know what it is to not cap a performer. I know, I understand performance and
What does that mean, not cap
visuals.
a performer? What does that mean?
Well, when you, when I got into directing, I felt I had a good handle on how to work with actors, depending on what their process was, right? Because I had spent so much time backing singers, playing with performers, what they needed for support. And I saw what maybe wasn't a good experience for them, or been in the studio where I saw someone capped, where they were over critiqued and suddenly you can't get anything out of them. And so that kind of gauge that kind of informed me. There was so much about my music life that informed the film working life. I've edited feature film, I've edited documentaries, I've edited music videos and everything. That pacing in an edit and everything totally comes from my understanding of flow and pace behind a drum kit. I mean, and I've met a lot of editors who were former musicians. So it all got informed. It was really pretty.
That's amazing. The first time I ever worked with editors, I was working on a project about an artist in Trinidad and Carnival.
Yeah.
And I was working with these two editors, and it was literally one day with one, the other day with the other one day with one, the other.
Wow.
And I would create a paper edit, and the one editor I went to, he would snatch the paper edit away from me, and then basically vaguely cut where I had exactly where the cut was.
And I gave him a paper edit.
Yeah. And he would not follow it at all. The other one, I went in and I told him what I wanted, and he was a musician. And I didn't have to do anything. I could feel the rhythm of because it was very musical, but I could feel the rhythm of the edit, and he had it, and that was it.
Yeah.
And it was like night and day.
Yeah.
Night and day. And I was like, I never want to work with an editor who's not a musician again.
Okay, I'll be right over. Yeah, I think there's something to that. I think flow and pace and tone and all those things, and music really comes down to it's not storytelling, but I mean you're still performing something with the end goal being to create a response, to create an emotional experience for an audience. It does not change. I mean, the medium is different, but the intent to storytell is no different, right? And so then it just became learning craft, learning tech. And the big one I found was how to become visual, and I'd always drawn.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, how do you convert it to a visual storytelling? How, the angles, the lenses, what emotionally is that doing? And for me, it's always driven by what the audience needs to emotionally get based on the performance they're seeing. So that's what always influences it. Motivating the camera, positioning the camera. It's all done for how I can keep the emotional tone of the story in check, And then
it's so interesting what you're saying about being a drummer. I was a drummer in a band for a while, and
were you really?
I loved it. Oh my God, it was great. And but when you're saying that thing about being in that support role, I feel as though I got something from drumming, which was what you're saying, where I think a lot of times directors have perhaps a more a way of wanting to dominate actors, whereas thinking about it from a drummer's perspective,
yes,
instead of, like, a lot of directors think of themselves as the lead singer, right? They
Yeah.
think of themselves as the lead singer in a band, right?
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
when you're a drummer, that is not your role. Your
It is.
role is this sort of keeping everything together, keeping it moving, and keeping everybody in alignment. It's
Yeah.
a different set of skills.
Yeah.
It's
It's a
so
support.
different.
It leads, it leads. You can really cripple a band if you lead too hard, right? But it leads, but it's a supporting role. Directing's not supporting, but it's interesting you say that, because I think that is the way. When I started working with actors, it really was, my goal was, how can I get out of the way? I couldn't wait till I can get out of the way, because once you tweak it, once we've got the tone and we're on the same, once it's there, I just couldn't wait to get out of the way, because the thing that hooked me, and you've probably heard this how many times, Joanne, I'm sure, is that when you actually sit there and watch the performance happen and you see an actor slip in, between the DOP going, I think it's set for you guys, or up here we say frame, but whatever it is that they cue, they've got their shot, and you see the actor slide in. You see it happen. That's what got me hooked. I did some acting in high school. I don't tell people a lot of that, but
tell everything on this interview series.
yeah, but it's so there, it all led to performance and stage. So but when I see that happen, that's when the real stuff's going to go. It's not going to happen because I'm detailing you down to specifics. It's never going to happen that way. And I see people get frustrated and trying to be succinct. I try and not do that. I think my concept really was, and I learned this when I did the true crime shows, because there was about 4 years of it. It was a lot of episodes. And I really did love it. And I thought every director needs to come and do this for a time.
Oh,
it teaches you to be effective. It teaches you, speed is okay, but it teaches you how to organize. But what it really does, it really helps you be clear, and it helps you to be at least prepared enough that you don't have time to steer a crew or anybody down the wrong tunnel or being over detailed, but being succinct. And it's no different than writing a good book, right? If you're clear and concise, people get it. And then let them, the other side of it is, they're also artists. They're contributing.
Yes.
Actors are the ones carrying the story. I'm not. And I'm the one responsible for delivering what we said we're going to do and keeping their story and, keeping their performance in line. And the arc is, the whole story is in my head, keeping us in the right sync. But for them in the moment, that you have to get out of their way so they can really find that moment and it feels real. It seems to work for me, but
that's great. I feel as though we missed a step though, because there you were, you wrote to the agents, you got a reply, you started working.
I started working and then I started
on the writing side, on the script side.
Yeah.
Then you went to the music videos. Oh, that makes so much sense, because now you're part of a community.
Yeah.
You're part of a community and everybody knows you. So why wouldn't they hire you to make their music videos?
Yeah, because it was fairly new-ish at the time.
Right.
Well, not new, like not MTV new, but it was new here, and people were starting to discover it because online was accessible. That's where it was. It was streaming, and that was beginning. And then when I did film group, and then because I knew I wanted to storytell, and that meant directing and doing that. And then I did a series of short films, and that was sort of the training ground, right? I was lucky enough to work with some really good camera guys. 2 of them are ones I still work with. And
wow.
But they were well versed. So it was a good training ground, and fortunate enough to get some really good actors who could really take it. But at the same time, as much as you're learning the sort of techie side of it, it was really funny. I understood it. It all made sense to me. It made sense. And I understood the visual component, and because I was also editing as well, I could see the cut in my head as we were doing it. So it just, it was,
Do
it feels
you
like I should say more, but it really just kind of made sense.
no, do you remember how you got your first directing gig that was beyond a music video? I don't want to put down music videos because music videos is great, but
yeah.
do
But
you remember when you got your first gig in television or something like that?
yeah,
Or was it not that? Did you maybe go to make shorts first?
I made the shorts, and then
Oh, okay.
I did a few shorts. One that, two of them that probably won't want to mention too much because
There are always those.
it's a great idea going in, and so I learned
It was
some.
good in my head. It was good in my head.
And it was about process and about, or too long, and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I did do one that I think really started, where I really started to get a sense of, okay, this is how I convert to this kind of storytelling. And it was a World War II thing, and it was a lot of fun. It was really visual, and I was pretty proud of it when it was done. I still like the film.
What's it called?
Truce.
Nice.
Yeah.
The title.
Yeah. It was kind of an interesting concept, but and at the time, I got a studio that I could do it in. We built the whole set. It was not in someone's house. We actually built the set. We staged it. And we had the crew would come, and it was really the first real experience of, whoa, this is what good gaffers can do. This is what a great cameraman can really do with it. This, and it's, you find that it's funny. I learned how to not get into that thing of protecting your vision, right? What tends to happen. Found that, my vision was what was inspiring all of them, and they were the tradescraft. Like, that was their craft. That was their angle to it. And they would always bring more. You found that it was exceeding the expectation almost, and so it kind of embracing collaboration, in a way that you're still responsible for saying yes or no, or if you still got to keep the train moving. But that it seemed to take the pressure off, in the sense that you don't have to have all the really great ideas all the time. That's kind of a misnomer, but you have to be smart enough to know the parameters, so that if there's a good idea, it still fits. And the other one is, you have to be prepared enough that you know how to make the left turn if you do, and still keep it on the track, right? Like, I don't show up not knowing. I have the plan. I know what we want to do, but it doesn't mean that we're going to discover something better while we're doing this, right? And because I have a lot of very smart people around me, and that was the other lesson on the true crimes when that came. But after the short film is the thing we could talk about that I think really pertains to what you do. And I had a friend of mine who's another drummer, and he was a writer, and his partner, they had started a program. They got into a thing here, and I sent Avi a note. Producer in Toronto, Avi Fettergreen, he's got a company. He's pretty widely regarded, but he had a thing called IndieCan, and he had a program that was crowdfunding films and helping filmmakers and storytellers get that start. And he did it by province. And so my writing friend and his producer, they had applied to that program. I didn't even know it existed. And they had sort of gotten the ball rolling. They had won it for Manitoba, and they started working with a production company here that was affiliated with IndieCan, and that whole thing. I came into it later. I think they had another director that started with them, and I don't know really what happened or what changed that. But my writing friend Alan called me, and at that point, would you want to direct it? And I was like, pretty much running with my hair on fire. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. Are you kidding? And
it's funny, I have clients, not so many, but clients who are producers, who hire a director. and they always think that they're not going to find somebody, you know, really good. And I'm like,
yeah, well, I get it. It's a, you know, it's a not proven, right, tried and true thing. And I think the real craft is, and you'll probably say this too, is it's one thing to be able to do it. It's another thing, you know, you have to know how to finish it, right? You have to know how to deliver. You have to know how to schedule, and you have to know how to do all that. And so anyway, we came into it, and I saw what they had done so far, and I saw the lighting list requirement. And so they had gotten on, I think it was GoFundMe, I'm not sure, and they had done the crowdfunding, and they had to come up with 10 grand. And they have a program here as well, and it's not a program, but it's Manitoba Film and Music up here in Manitoba is sort of the hub for film production. And they have a great thing where they'll do, you know, budget matching kind of thing. I'm not a producer, so I might get some of the terminology wrong. So hopefully my Winnipeg friends don't kick me in the butt for it. But they do have it. So I mean, it really, if you can raise this much money, they can match this much. And so between everything, they managed to get together $10,000. And at that point, you know, and then you shoot a film in like 10 days. I mean, it's fast. It's fast. And it was an ambitious script. It really was. It was a thriller.
How was it, by the way? What's the name of it?
It's called A Desperate Road.
Hmm.
It is on Tubi. I think it's still on Tubi, and you can see it on Apple TV. It's there. And I just found out, I just talked to producer Jen, just the other day, and it's on, is there something in the States called Vudu?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
It's part of their $5 push I don't know. It's got life out there. It's kind of interesting. But the process of doing, I saw the lighting list, and there was a crane and a dolly, and I'm like, what? Yeah. And I called my friend Steve Morrison, who's DP. He's working in Toronto. He's been there for years, works on all these big shows. And so, but I called him, and he had access, and I basically, we just looked at each other and went, that's all gone. We're not even using it. It's a handheld movie. That's it. And you know, because with the time, it's not important to get the beautiful crane shot. It's important to get the coverage, and it's important to get the performance. That is all that matters here. And we were really fortunate to get a good cast. I know that says a lot, but they really did. And I'm sure it wasn't the most, I mean, it's, you know, you see the script, and then you're looking at 10 and a half days to shoot a movie. I'm sure everyone's going, whoa. Yeah, but it was really the learning experience for me. I mean, you could do short films, you could do all that.
Yes.
Now you're going to long form.
Yeah.
So now you have to figure out how to pace. And I told them how I wanted to do the film. Steve and I came up with, I like a style of editing for a thriller. I like a jump cut style, especially for this kind of thing. I like nudging. I like doing all these things that keep the audience in and riveted. Mm. And I storyboarded everything that was action, everything that was movement was absolutely all storyboarded. And so we kind of came up with the look, and actually surprised, it really looks really great. We were starting to get to know it, but by the time I finished shooting, then because I had already edited, I had already done documentaries, I was well familiar with being in an avid bay. And so, you know, there wasn't the resources. We ended up having to, I edited the entire film from start to finish. And then, you know, we also had sound issues during production, which was a learning curve, right? We, you know,
everyone has sound issues on their first feature.
Sound issues. Well, I had a really great post house guys that I was working with that were friends, and they really shepherded the film, you know, in post production, you know, to get it finished, and they really came through. Mm-hmm. But they're also real pros, and they sat down and we did an audit on the sound, and they went, well, there's a lot to fix. And I just made the decision, and I went back to the producer and to Alan, and I said, I think we have to rebuild everything. So in my house now was the true lesson of ADR. And I was really fortunate. I had some sound people. I have a best friend who's a music producer and knew how to, had an app to sync the way they lip sync, as long as you get it relative. The app, you know, in Pro Tools will dial it in dead on. I was like, so it sort of saved it. And then we did everything. Everything was ADR'd. All the actors came in and did it. We redid Foley. We did our own special effects track. We did everything was built from the ground up. There was no on the day. So and I think the film is better for it. I mean, when we saw that the syncing can work that well,
Yes.
you just get it. It just, because ADR can sound pretty processed and fairly not good. And on that film, it came across pretty seamlessly. And
I have a client who just went through that exact thing. His film just came out in January. It's called Homestead, but it should have come out the January before.
yeah, it took time.
Realized he had to ADR everything.
Yeah.
And it was also in COVID, so he couldn't bring the actors together.
Yeah.
He ended up sending them equipment to use to record, and he did it all himself by hand. It was just,
it is daunting. I
daunting.
want to do it again. I'm not going to call myself some expert in sound. I've never been, even though some people seem to think so because you've been a musician. It's like, okay.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not usually how it works. And but I wouldn't give up that experience for anything. I have such an understanding now of what I need from sound.
Yes.
And how to avoid problems later in post. And given that kind of film again, to be able to say, no, I know exactly what we're going to do, and to grab pieces, to run and gun some sound effect pieces right here in the spot in the same set, outdoors, indoors, whatever. Do one quick pass of movement for sound, and I've got it. So if I have to replace anything, we're done.
Yeah.
And it seems to gravitate. But because of that film, it did take a long time to get it out there. You're right. So because post is very hands-on, right? There's no budget there really. And I think everyone was pretty happy. I think they were a little shocked. And maybe I had the pace of the cut a little too fast, I think, in the beginning. But fair enough. I mean, that's all part of that process too, of when everyone's involved, they all have a stake in it, and you have to work with people. This is the other side of this gig that you got to get good at. But from that came the opportunity to do true crime. And from there, it was a steady working,
That's really amazing. And the steady work, but that was a very independently produced film. So still, what was the transition into directing television?
It was they had a locally here, there was they still have it. It's not quite the same. Bell Media had a program. They had Stories from Home, and a lot of local filmmakers could do documentaries based in Manitoba. I did about four of them. And they were really great to, I did a very ambitious cab history thing with the same company who was behind the film, which was Farpoint here in Winnipeg, and working with them to get it done. And then I went on to do another one and a third one that's still screening. Actually, it's screening Canada Day here. It was about the research ship. We have a lake up here. It's called Lake Winnipeg, and it's sort of an inland sea. And there's a lot of focus on the lake about LJ, and it's kind of regarded for it, has LJ problems and things like that. So there's a research ship, and I went and did a doc on it that I absolutely really do like. And yeah, so it was great. I mean, the Ecological Fund group in around Lake Winnipeg wanted to screen it on Canada Day, which is July. Up here it's July 1st. For you, it's the 4th. And so I mean, it still has a life. And from working with them and working with that, one of the producers there passed my name to the producers doing the true crime show. They were looking for more directors, and that's how I came to come in. And it's funny. And then the showrunner was actually, she was one of my directing instructors when I joined the film group. So
wow,
still one of my favorite people to work with. Yeah. And she's a great showrunner. But I mean, and it was that working on that show was really the fine tuning of how to get this job done. I did like 2 or 3 pilots over the time for other shows for them as well, and so you learn how to work with producers. You learn how to be clear on what you're going to try and do, get their sign off, and then deliver what you say you're going to deliver.
What do you think is the difference between in film production and television production? What would you say are the main differences?
Speed. The speed of how you get it done, even if you're doing dialogue scenes. For a direct, it's very different. Film is very much a director's medium. And it's, you're solely responsible. The look, a lot of things are attributed to what your concept is of it. I think that's a better way to put it. You say vision, it makes you sound like you've done it all yourself or something. That's a misnomer. We know that. But you're definitely the one responsible for the concept and for, the overall delivery of what you said you're going to do with it. And in television, that's not the case, right? I think a showrunner is far more responsible for the overall tone that things are, right? And I think DOPs have a far better idea about the style and the shooting of a show. In television, and directors are more just responsible with blocking and performance, and right. And in the true crime, it was very much somewhat that way, but it was far more of a team effort. The style was already dictated. The things like that were sort of already in play. And so it came down to, especially true crime. I mean, the reenactments, some of the shows were more demanding on, the reality to a reenactment and the performance that was coming. Others weren't. But it definitely was, learning how to be fast and accurate, and still had to deliver something that was, and coverage. I think a lot of editors, we did things, Joanna, that, on the budget we had, blew up cars. I blew up a building, I blew up a woman, and
oh my God.
Bombs and scenes. And I mean, it was really something. My son I brought him into it, I think about in the 3rd year. And he's still in the industry now on a, much higher level than that. But every once in a while, he still even says, sometimes I just miss that show, because it was a smaller group. It's far more of a team environment. There's a lot of smart people around you. Problems can get solved, but it was definitely learning how to be efficient and quick. And
which show was that? Which one was that called?
Oh, there were several. One was
I see.
I think the other one was Killer in Plain Sight, which I think is still on Prime. I think it's on Prime.
Yes. I watched a short called In Plain Sight. Was that somehow connected with the TV series? But
I don't know, actually.
Okay.
But
it's called In Plain Sight. No.
Yeah, I was strictly just mostly directing, sometimes writing. So I really wasn't connected with where they went after or anything like that. But
my experience, I was hired by a showrunner, a friend of mine, Janice Engel, on a show called Addicted. And she said many times, television, not film, Joanne, television is not film. And I was like, okay, I was waiting to see, what it was. But I think from my memory of it, it was just different in that we were part of a much larger corporate structure.
Yeah.
So she was the showrunner, but then back in LA, there was a whole team of story producers and people like that. And then there was the experience of the people at the very top saying, we want to see what you've got.
Yeah.
And we're making a show about drug addicts. One of my roles was casting. So I was finding people who were basically about to die, who would accept being on a show and to go through an intervention and get treatment.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Important
And
topic.
sorry,
Important topic.
yes, very important topic. And so I was dealing with people who are like, really out there in society, and so they would look at the footage that we had, which was graphic and painful, and they would say, "Oh, it's not strong enough. We need it stronger."
Yeah.
And I'll never forget that, because I was just like, these are human beings.
I know. Yeah.
And they kept doing it. They upped the ante like 3 times over the months. And then finally, when the first show was cut, they said, "Oh, it's too graphic."
Yeah. I know it's a hard target to hit sometimes. It's hard. I think I thought I was really fortunate. I think they gave me a lot of latitude. After a while, I think maybe there was a level of trust there. But at the same time, I think sometimes I might have went too far. But it does. You get caught up. And I remember, it's funny you mentioned that, because I do remember sitting in on an edit on one of the shows, and the editor was, he was on the whole show, quite a few of them actually. And we're looking at the shot, and it was of this, it was of a killing and stuff. And the editor made some comment about, oh, see, oh, like that shot, and suddenly he stopped. What am I talking about? This was a real person. Like, it's like some it's almost like moral conscience just gonna tick them in the head.
Right.
But that's that gig. But as far as on the working side and stuff, it was a great training ground. I think we had a lot of directors who here are regarded for film and stuff, and they came in and did shows too. And and I think it was just a great way to flex muscle and do that. Yeah.
So what are you doing now?
Well, it was interesting. That was right up until the pandemic, and I had, in that time too, I had acquired a manager. I'd still kept writing my own scripts. Things I wanted to do, a couple of passion projects. One was a love letter drumming script. So yeah.
Well, we had Oscars for those kind of movies recently.
Yeah. And then I did a writing challenge for myself and wrote this thing called Sod Man. Everyone hates the title, but I love it. And it's 1870 in a sod house, and it turned out to be a writing challenge. But then when I was done, it was funny. I gave it to my agent. I think she was questioning, why are you writing this? And I was like, well, it's like, treat it like a play. I've never done a play, and it'd be great to really get into one character, because when you're writing thrillers and you're doing stuff, I mean, the idea to a thriller is you are affecting plot, right? I mean, that's just the name of that game. Yeah. And so it was nice to just really focus on a character's experience. It got violent, it gets violent. It has all this whole history. And when I sent it to my agent, she called me back. She said, well, okay, I think it's the best thing you've ever written. Like, it was good. Yeah. And it actually got me some traction. And we got a manager, and I was in LA, and people wanted to have meetings, and it was about that script.
Yeah.
And then it sort of came to a grinding halt. The pandemic hit. I had a show that also was getting into development, that was about a 1912 brothel situation. And I was working with producers out of Toronto, and then it sort of everything kind of slowed down at that point, and that's, it was interesting. And that I had just bought all my camera gear and all that stuff. And it started thinking, I better get gear, because I'm going to start getting busy. And then the pandemic hits, and it changes a lot. So, which was great. I mean, I started doing a lot more writing, and one of the companies I had worked for had a 6-episode series that they were doing that I think went to bounce. I was writing on that through a lot of the pandemic. I got asked to adapt a novel for a Indigenous artist up here named Seaweed, and he's really recognized through Canada. So he had a novel come out. He's got a pretty neat story, but I think he came to me because he only knew me as a drummer, right? Years ago. And
Drumming is still showing up a lot.
well, for him, he wanted the story about music, even though he's got a really great life story. But, you know, it was like, adapt the book, and I adapted it and wrote that as a feature. And that was a commission that I was paid for. And then the company that I'd worked with in the true crime stuff, they had read the script. I don't think they didn't connect. And then they saw I was connected to it. And then, so now the question was, could it be a series, which happens a lot up here, right? I don't know about down there for you, but up here, a lot of the question is, I think it's easier to get a series off the ground. So that question comes up a lot. So there, I think I'll be writing that, you know, in the next while. They're working on getting the money for that. And then I got the book, and I pulled the book out of the drawer, and I became determined to get the damn thing out there, you know?
Great. That's great.
Great. And I wrote that as a script. I took that script and readapted it and told my manager who I wanted to get it to. I don't know if they're going to get it, but we'll see. I don't want to direct that. You can only, there's the other lesson. Don't do everything. You write the book, it's almost enough, you know? Too much one voice is never a good thing.
Yeah, yeah. I want to see if anybody has any questions. This is always our time for questions.
I just want to thank you for coming.
Yes.
Thanks for listening. This is great. This is great. This is a nice change to the day.
Yeah, yeah. So with which, if you were going to have a project that you were, let's go with Marcy's question. Okay, go ahead, Marcy.
Hi, Cam, thanks for coming.
Hi, how are you?
Good. I'm a producer, director, and actor, and I'm in the middle of producing my first documentary feature. And after producing 3 shorts. And my question for you as an editor, I know there's sort of like an outline in a documentary that I followed in order to recruit my interviewees. Right. As an editor, though, you know, that story kind of changes as you're interviewing. You're adding more things and so forth. What should I look for in an editor to tell my story, to make sure that it's the vision? What's important to look for in this person to complete this whole vision?
Okay. 2 things that I'm going to stress to you. One is, if you do have a choice of editors, definitely seeing that they have an understanding of the subject matter, like the subject on its own, right? Okay. Do they have an understanding, or what's their impression, or what's their opinion of it? And I think if they have an understanding of it, that helps. If you're dealing with someone who has no sort of pre-experience or pre-knowledge, that could affect their understanding of how things fit together. Okay. The second one is, yes, I've always used, I got in the habit of using an outline, but the thing that I started to do, and I did this, I did a lot of work as a drummer as well, for Modern Drummer in New York, and I created a video interview series, and I got to sit down with some of my favorite drummers ever and talk with them. So because I was a little intimidated, to be honest, I actually set up I would have pre-calls with them, and it's like a pre-interview. And what I would do at the pre-interview, I would record it for my own benefit, and we would just talk, and I would just get them talking about their experience or what it was. And I found in documentaries, it was the same. And it doesn't matter how long you talk. And then there's programs that you can use to get the transcript of that conversation. And I would take that transcript and I would have a beat sheet. It wasn't like a 2-column script, right? Like for documentary, it's always visual and what's said or narrated, whatever. Which is sort of what I would call a paper edit script. But I would have a beat sheet, which was in script form, and I could plug from that transcript in, so that when I actually did put them on camera and actually did talk to them, I kind of had a pretty good idea of what I needed from them and where it would sort of fit in. Now, that's not written in gold, but it at least let me organize it so that I could create some kind of a paper edit, like what Joanne was talking about it, when she was trying to find edit, like giving them a paper edit. And it doesn't mean it has to be so strict, but at least it gives them the layout that they can at least find those pieces. And it can happen pretty fast that way, because if you have an editor, I know in Avid, they have a thing called phrase find, which I absolutely love. You can literally type in the sentence or a word that you're looking for, and it will find it in the recordings, in the audio, and you'll call up the clip, and you'd be surprised how fast they can lump together that basic assembly. And once they have the assembly front to back, then you're really starting to shape something, right? You're going to move things around. There's going to be thing, and you also get a sense of where B-roll is going to help, where the other thing that all of that does is it helps who's ever shooting it for you. It helps inform them as to what they should get for B-roll, because if you just have people going out and shooting things, sometimes it doesn't fit with what we're hearing, right? So B-roll it helps inform what you need for B-roll along the way as well.
Right, because there's so much footage. I've
footage.
shot like 10 days right now, and there's so much footage. And in my mind, I'm asking the questions to fit my outline, and the B-roll, working with my DP on, I guess you spoke earlier about emotions, about helping convey the emotion through the B-roll to match what the person is saying. So you've got, that whole picture. But yeah, I'm like, how are we going to get that editor to piece all of that together? I like what you said though about the subject matter, someone who's familiar.
Yeah, and you have to really try and give them some kind of script.
Yeah.
And if you've got interviews done, like I said, you can. What is the Otter is
Audit AI, yeah.
Audit AI is fantastic. It's actually really good, and you just upload not the video from you don't have to upload the camera video, but you just have to grab the audio from it and upload the audio. You get a transcript back, and you'd be surprised once you have it in a transcript and you see words. You can actually start taking pieces and chunks out and get conversation flow happening, because how they all go together from, let's say, if it was you and then Joanne, and and so you both said things, but maybe something that you said in one sentence triggers the next sentence for Joanne, and suddenly you have flow going. And it's pretty hard to discover that in the edit bay when you're looking through all of the footage. And it really is helpful to give them some kind of layout. It doesn't mean it's got to be written in stone. You don't have to detail it to that point and fret about it, but at least you're giving them a construct. And I think that's a huge, huge advantage. And I have yet to see an editor that does not like getting that, because, they're going to go through the footage, and a good editor will still go through all the footage. But if they have a sense of there's a script to follow, that they have a sense of how to start putting it together, because once you get it initially together, then you can start shaping things and reshaping.
Right.
But they have a context of beginning, middle, and end. And otherwise it's a mountain of footage. And if they don't have a thread, it's tough on an editor, Now, some editors might like that. I don't know, but for you, you have an idea of why you want. Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, but it also helps you kind of participate in how this is going to turn out. You know what you want to do with the doc when you started, and documentaries are a morphing thing. That I got a great piece of advice, actually from my showrunner, who was taught me in the film group, and she had a great piece of advice: is that the difference between a documentary is it's the central question, right? And you're always, what is the central question? It's like in drama, you're trying to answer, you have a thread in drama, and what's the theme, blah, blah, blah. But in documentaries, it's what is the central question? What is it you're trying to answer? And if you keep everyone tied to that central question, it helps you kind of keep it sort of on that line. And it helps your editor understand too. And because you'll find you'll always come back to that question will help sort of keep everybody sort of paralleled in a little bit. Even cameramen, if they had an understanding of what the central question is, they'll find things to shoot that sort of endorse that question, attempt to answer.
I think we're very prepared with that. So
Mhm.
with those central questions of, I'm gonna move on
Thank
to
you.
the last question. Thank you so much for that, Marcy. That was
Thank you.
awesome. Because I actually have a meeting at 1 o'clock. Priya, let's hear your question.
Hey, so sorry I couldn't be on camera. My internet connection is not the best today, but thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for everything today. Cam, I specifically was very interested in joining today's interview because of how multi-dimensional of a skill set you have. So that's something I wanted to ask you a little bit about. Obviously with like drumming, then you were in IT and you're a writer, director, producer, and so on and so forth. I'm sure there's a number of things on the list that you haven't mentioned. And I am sort of in a similar boat. I have a career as a product person in the tech world, but I'm also a writer and a producer. I can edit. My dream is to direct, and I've done a little bit of that. Also a dancer. So my question for you is, were there, kind of knowing that all of these and sort of pursuing all of these parts of your personality and your skill set, were there ever any points in your career or in your life where maybe you felt a little bit lost or confused about what the path forward looked like? And if so, or even if not, how did you kind of, I guess overall, how did you handle knowing how to move forward next, given that there's so many different aspects of your life that you care about?
Wow. Good question. I'm still trying to figure that out, actually. Yeah, thank you. That's very flattering. I think I'm a little too humble to say, oh yeah, I've had this smattering. It's funny. For me, I think it's always gravitating towards a creative life. I don't know if, I love all the aspects of it. I hope I'm getting better as I go on in directing, writing, even drumming. To this day, I still play. I'm still trying to hopefully getting better, getting smarter as I get older, hopefully with it all. I'm working on another novel. Hopefully I'll have it done soon. But honestly, it's, unless you're hugely, hugely successful, sometimes diversity is the only key to maintaining a creative life. I had, like you, I was in IT for a long time. And when I got out of it, I was actually laid off way back in 2010. And I kind of made the decision at that point, I wasn't going back. And it was sort of, and that by that time my kids were older. So I guess maybe that was a moment of clarity when I thought I could actually really dive in and do this. And I did produce a music video for the Canadian Armed Forces just the year later. And things started to really move at that point, at least in that time frame. But the thing that I always come back to, it's funny because I do love directing. I love the process of it. I really do enjoy it. I like working with crew, team. I love all that stuff. But if you ask me the things I always come back to, the things I don't do when I'm not doing them, that I feel a little off center, there's only two. If I'm not drumming, if I'm not writing. So if someone really asks me what I am, I think that might be it, because there's drumsticks on my couch. I'll show them if you really need to see them. But it's always there. And I'm always writing. I'm always doing it. It's the thing that keeps me centered. If that makes any sense at all. I'm not sure that does, but
because what I was going to add, and thank you for the beautiful question, Priya. One of the things I was going to say is that I used to teach Zumba and yoga.
Oh.
And there was a certain point where I decided, I need to stop doing that and focus on my business. maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I made that decision. But what I've realized is that without a balance between all of the intellectual work that I do and the physical, I don't do very well.
Yeah.
And what I'm hearing with the drumming is that there's a physical part, and then there's the writing that's a different set of skills. It's like, but it's still that creative outlet. But having those two really makes sense to me.
You know, it is. I can't talk about this one project. It's a drumming project. Hopefully it comes back. But
as I said, there were 2 drumming Oscar projects. There was the first one about the abusive
Whiplash,
and then there was The Sound of Metal.
Yeah, Sound of Metal, and that did really well. So yeah, I think it's time to have one. My thing, and was what Joanne spoke to, was how do you write a story about this thing? There's a thing about drummers. We are different people. It's like the goalie is a different hockey player.
Right.
Goalies will always hang together, and drummers will always hang together. But there's this need to do it. You can't, sticks in your hand. If you're not doing it, you're going to throw yourself a little off center. It just exists. And I'm going to guess it probably is the same for musicians of other instruments, but somehow it seems to be more pronounced with drummers.
Because it's physical, I think.
It could be. And
such a physical activity, a whole body activity.
It is. So the script I wrote called The Swing King, which hopefully gets a life out there, some interesting producer that wants to do it. But the thing is, though, it was really about that. It was about this young kid and this older guy, famous drummer, walked away from it, younger kid wanting to in. So it was coming of age for both of them in the same direction. Like the kid brought him back to it that he shouldn't have left in the first place. You know, and it really spoke to that thing that you can't get away from, right? But it's, you know, the balance, you know, without a balance, none of it means anything, kind of thing.
I'm gonna pull us to a close because oddly enough, I have a meeting that I have to run to. I don't usually have things backed up to my this, but anyway, Cameron, this has been absolutely fantastic. What a pleasure to meet you again.
And I'm going to reach out to you and get some advice on.
Wonderful. Because the thing is that when I do this interview, I get to have a whole hour to really hear about somebody's work, and it's such a pleasure. Really is. Really.
Yeah,
is.
I'm humbled. Thanks for asking me. It's great.
Well, thank you. Thanks everybody for coming and listening. Thanks for your questions, and we'll see you all in a couple of weeks. Thanks, Emily. Bye-bye.